Mental health and mental illness is such a complicated topic for me. On the one hand, I'm very grateful that over the last decade or so, there's been a growing awareness of mental health issues, and in this way, there is more space in society now for people to understand and tolerate and make space for people who struggle. And to get the help that they need. So I do appreciate that. But there's a dark side to it that I see as being very harmful in the way that it's been dealt with. And so that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today. And maybe it's something that you've experienced or someone that you know has experienced, but it's just something that I thought was really worth mentioning. And just for context, this is a journey that I've walked. I was diagnosed bipolar type 2, and I went through the system. I was medicated for several years, and so I understand how the system works, and have had my own journey through that. The positive side of things is that now, because we've acknowledged these mental health issues, as they're called, as I say, people are allowed to, given more space to take time off work or, get help, and medical insurance covers these things. So these are advantages. The first thing I wanted to mention was that it's very strange that these things are called mental health or mental illness, because for me, I like to draw a definite distinction between issues of the mind and issues of the heart. And the vast majority, the overwhelming majority, of the issues that are described under the umbrella of mental health is not mental, so to speak. It's got nothing to do with your mind. It's emotional well-being is a word that I would put it as. So being depressed or being anxious, these are emotional issues. These are matters of spirit and heart. They're not mental issues, really. A mental issue would be if you can't calculate numbers. So I'd almost say that something like dyslexia or something like that, that could be considered a mental health concern, because it affects the mind and how the mind functions. But emotional well-being is a very different thing to me to a mental health issue. But that just kind of alludes to how our society processes everything. We need to see it as a mental health issue because it needs to impact your job or your ability to be a parent or your ability to function in society in order for us to take it seriously. Anything that you can't do within society, if you can't perform your role or your job or your function, that's a concern for society. The system doesn't like that. It needs you to get back on the horse and fulfill your role. So it's quite logical then that it would consider these things mental health issues, because you need your mind to do your job, so this is a mental health issue. But it's not really. But calling it an emotional wellness issue relegates it to this soft corner where it's not really that important and that we won't take it that seriously. So just a bit of a clue as to how we deal with these things. But the bad side of our growing awareness into mental health, as it's called, is that what happens to someone is they suffer from something, whether it's anxiety or depression or whatever the case is. They suffer from something. As I say again, the overwhelming majority of people who suffer from these things, they suffer for them for a reason. Okay, I think that if you've had any experience with this, you'll know that there's a reason that you're anxious. There's a reason why you're depressed. You're not always aware of what the reason is. Sometimes these things become complicated over time, and it's difficult for us to find the root issue. But I think anyone who's had a significant healing experience will say, I realized what it was that was causing my depression. I realized why I was an anxious person. If this wasn't a realization that could occur, then nobody would ever embark on a healing journey. No one would ever go to therapy, because the whole process of going to therapy is to uncover what the root issue is. And often it's not successful because we think we know what it is, so we almost misdirect the entire process. But that's not the issue. The issue is that there's a reason for these things. Now, when you go to a psychiatrist or a doctor, in order for you to be able to claim from your medical insurance, they need a diagnostic code. They need to give a diagnosis for your mental health condition, as it's called. So they will diagnose you bipolar, or they'll diagnose you, having depression or chronic anxiety, based on a set of symptoms that you're presenting. You're presenting a set of symptoms, and those symptoms then fall into that category, and then you get that diagnosis. And that diagnosis then allows you to go and claim from your insurance to get therapy or to go onto medication and so on and so forth. So the system has funneled itself into a position where there needs to be a label. There needs to be a label in order for the system to continue functioning. The problem with this is, and it's a serious problem, is that when a doctor, which is somebody that most people place a high level of esteem in, they respect their opinion as being learned and knowledgeable. When a doctor gives you a label, bipolar, anxious, and tells you that it is a mental illness, that label then attaches itself to your self-esteem, to your identification of yourself. You're no longer John or Jack or Jane. You're now bipolar John or anxious Jane or PTSD Paul. This becomes a part of who you are. This becomes a part of how you see yourself. You see yourself now as somebody who is bipolar. I've experienced this. And now you're being prescribed medication. And you need to take your medication every single day because you're ill, because you have this disease, as it's called. Except, if anyone has gone through this is not medication to cure your illness. There's never any talk. I was with my psychiatrist for many years. We never spoke about curing my bipolar. He never gave me the medication and said, this medication will make your bipolar better. Take it for 3 months and then you'll be better. That's not the point. The point of a lot of these psychiatric medications, antidepressants and so on, mood stabilizers, is that they're there to mitigate the symptoms that you're experiencing. And they're not trying to cure you. So, because of that, it becomes a chronic illness, an illness that exists over time and has no end. So there's no more thorough way to change your sense of identity than to tell you that you have a new label that will last for the rest of your life. And this label comes with a lot of baggage. You now have to take medication. And this self-identification as somebody who now has a mental illness has the most profound, crippling and handicapping effect on that individual. Because now, every single thing that happens in your life is viewed through the lens of your handicapped self, of the bipolar you. So if you're in a crowd and you're suddenly feeling anxious, you think to yourself, did I take my medication this morning? I've been through this sudden panic of, I forgot to take my meds this morning. How am I going to get through the day? The half-life on most of these medications, you wouldn't even feel anything for the first part of the day, or even the whole day. Prozac, you wouldn't feel anything for a week if you stopped taking it. It has a very slow half-life. And yet, I have seen time and time again and experienced it for myself that when someone forgets to take their tablets, they go into a complete spin because they don't know how they're going to cope with the day without their medication. So they're now dependent on this medication, not just physically, but psychologically, because they believe that they're ill, and without the medication, they cannot survive, they cannot function. This is probably one of the most damaging things that you can do to a human being, because in order for you to have a healthy, healed, resilient, and positive outlook on your life, I can guarantee you that the most important thing that you need is a healthy outlook to struggle, a healthy outlook to the setbacks that happen in your life. When something goes wrong during the day, you have a conflict with somebody, you have something go wrong that you didn't expect or you didn't want, your ability to look at that constructively and say, this is something that I need to learn to surrender to. This is something that is good for me. I'm ultimately going to be better off once I've gotten through this difficult situation. It's not a punishment. It's not a failure. It's a teacher, and it's going to teach me, and I'm going to be better. So the medication that is supposed to be managing your symptoms and managing and helping you to feel well is actually sabotaging your ability to be a healthy person in such a fundamental way, because what it does is it takes away your ability to see normal human struggle constructively. Your view on normal human struggle becomes one of an indication of your mental illness. Every time you struggle with something, every time you feel anxious or down or sad or whatever, you think, this is because I'm depressed. Maybe I need to see my doctor. Maybe I need to change my meds. These meds aren't working. Why aren't these meds working? Is it because I didn't take my tablet this morning? Is it my condition is getting worse? This whole view on the difficulties of life will destroy your possibility of ever being well. Absolutely destroy it. And I've seen this when, people who come to work with me with plant medicine have to get off their antidepressants in order to participate. And I've watched this psychology play out when somebody starts to wean off their meds long before there's any possibility of a physiological change. They panic. And anything that goes wrong during the day, they're like, no, I don't think I can do this. I need my meds to function. And it's a placebo. That is a placebo effect. And more so than just something simple like a placebo, it's literally because of the new identity that you've attached to yourself, seeing yourself as handicapped, seeing yourself as somebody who cannot function outside of the support of those meds. And whether those meds are supporting you or not is a whole different question. The point is that the meds are part of this psychology, this identification of self, which is both crippling you and then allowing you to see the meds as being what is actually helping you. So, again, I appreciate the increased awareness around these issues and that we're trying to make space for people who are suffering through this. But I think the manner in which we've done that has become very damaging to the individual's sense of self and their own power, autonomy, and resilience within the way that they navigate life.